Welcome back to Unirunner Video Drum Lessons for February 15th, 2007. My name's Darren Mathis. Glad you could tune in. I was just kind of doing some solo stuff there. Relates to a couple of emails I received recently. Just received this one today from David Hastings in Meridian, Mississippi. David writes, he's talking about, I remember when I was first attempting to play drums in a band, the urge to solo was intense. Way back in the day when Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich would take off on a solo, it was usually in the middle of a number and sometimes would be punctuated by notes or measures of a song from a band. In a way, it was like a tap dancer doing stop time. Later in the 50s and 60s, Sandy Nelson would bring the drum solo to the masses with his hit, Let There Be Drums, that hit record. The Safaris made Wipeout an institution, and no drummer of that era could work if they couldn't play the boring and repetitive accented 4/4 classic. Anyway, fast forward to Grand Funk Railroad and Led Zeppelin, and the freeform drum solo, sometimes lasting 20 minutes, appeared, usually ending in a blinding flourish of hand and foot, multi-drum rolls, and exploding cymbals. Point is, we all want to solo, but don't know how to build a drum exposition that is doable, reliable, and sounds impressive. Would you consider making a podcast that outlines how to solo, the ins and outs of soloing, and most important, how to make that first solo happen? All the best, David Hastings. Well, when it comes to drum solos, in general, I don't particularly like them most of the time because most of the drum solos I hear tend to be kind of a show-off time or time to show your chops off, play as fast as possible. The drum solos that I do hear that I tend to like more are more musical and probably even more simplistic for the most part, and they can create contrast. So my two tips for soloing today are, number one, keep it musical, and number two, use dynamics, meaning build, have some place to build from. Because if you're soloing and you start off with your fastest lick or your loudest lick, you don't really have anywhere to go from there. So you're going to want to probably figure out what the pinnacle of your solo is, the climax of your solo, the loudest part or the most flashy or the coolest part, I guess, in your estimation, and then use that as the maximum and then build everything down from that so you have some place to work up to. Because no matter how fast you can play, if let's say you can only play, you want to play a single stroke roll and you can play about this fast. Well, that might not sound impressive if someone else's fast single stroke roll is faster, like this. But if you create contrast in your solo, say your fastest is this fast. You start off very slow, you'll create contrast and give a person a reference point or your audience a reference point. And no matter how fast you're able to play, it's going to seem impressive. If you start off really slow and simplistic, the more contrast between how you start off and how you end, the more emotion you could probably convey and a sense of excitement and building up and just kind of explosion and preferably going berserk at the end. I think I got that quote from Tommy Aldrich, who has some great tips on soloing on his video Double Bass Drum Workout. Here's a guy that probably every concert that he ever plays, he's always had a drum solo, double bass, but he talks about creating that contrast of having some place to go. You don't want to start off going berserk because you're not going to have anywhere to go, and it's going to be real monotone for people. So you want to create troughs or peaks and valleys, and a lot of dynamics to create interest, especially if your solo is going to be a long time, like if your band members go take a break. But the solos I like, for the most part, work within the context of a song and might have a theme repeating from a song idea or melody or something like that, or just groove based. You don't have to, in my opinion, throw in a bunch of rolls and rudiments if you can keep a solid groove going. Some of the coolest drum solos I've heard were just groove based, where it might just be a doing that because people like to groove to that. The average person could probably relate to that better than all of a sudden you're breaking into a type of onslaught. That might be a cool way to end your solo, you know, get a bunch of cymbals in there. But like at the solo that I was doing at the beginning, I like to start off, you know, quiet, give myself someplace to go. I might do something. I kind of got this idea from watching Alex Van Halen in their 5150 Live Without a Net video. He starts off his solo just kind of doing this really fast on the hi-hat. But I kind of like that, keeping the hi-hat going, because it gives you a basis, something to work on, or some sort of a rhythm that's repeated on the feet, and then you can solo over the top of it. So I like to do that hi-hat kind of thing a lot of times like that. I might just do some rudiments over the top of it. And I'm throwing the kick drum in there on different accents to accent different figures on the hands. And all that was just a single stroke with a double stroke added on my right hand. But for the most part, you're always safe, I think, within the context of a song if you keep the rhythm going, as opposed to all of a sudden you come to the solo section and you're changing up the speed and feel. Say you've got a stock drum lick that it's the only solo you've practiced, something like, you know, I've heard that before. You might have a kind of a funky blues song, and then all of a sudden they point to the drummer and he goes into this heavy metal double bass onslaught, and it just kind of rubs me the wrong way a lot of times. But if you can work within the style of the song, I think that's a lot more musical. Like, for instance, say you're doing some sort of funky blues thing or funky R&B gospel. Go right back into the groove, and if it's not going to throw people off if you know, they're getting into the music and kind of have that groove going. So those two tips, playing musically and with dynamics, giving yourself somewhere to go. Because like I said, if you can only play this fast, start out slower, because it's going to seem like you're playing faster. So start off simply and slowly. You know, a lot of drum solos you hear something like this. I've heard a lot of drum solos just start off with a kick drum, you know. Favorite. Want to read one more email from Lucas from Germany. He says, "Hi Darren, I've been playing drums for a few years now, and I've also been watching your podcast for a while. Good job." Hey, thanks Lucas. "I'm planning to play in a band at my school now, and I've got this drum battle in a few days where I have to play against two other drummers, and if I'm better than them, I'll be in the band for this year." That's kind of scary. "Do you have any advice that you could give me for the drum battle? I'm planning to just play freestyle. How do I show them that I'm the best? A quick reply would be good. Thanks and God bless." First of all, I would challenge the notion, if you think you're the best, then you might want to check yourself. At least in my experience, never consider yourself the best. You know, you might strive to be the best, but it's hard to know, and music is subjective. So what one person might like in a solo, another person might not like at all. So it really depends on who's listening to it. I mean, it's hard to say who's the best in music. You might get someone with a flurry of chops but has no sense of no musicality, and vice versa. But with what you've got, I would just go back to what I was talking about earlier. start out with your favorite lick, or the lick you think is the best. It's going to be your climax lick. Maybe it's just a flurry of cymbals, you know. And then build down from that and plan that as your maximum. And if you don't think you're that fast of a drummer, just start slower too, you know. And if you're not starting with any music, then I would definitely recommend starting with a musical idea of your own, like that, like I was just playing, where you almost have a melody, bum, 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 bum. And then that kind of gives you a musical framework to, more people are going to relate to that musical framework. If you almost have a piece of music in mind, or something that you're humming, that you're playing along to in your head, rather than just starting, you know, sitting down and all of a sudden. Start with a musical framework. You know, so it's almost like you're soloing within a piece of music that you've created, or freestyling on the fly. So I hope those help, those tips. Lucas and Dave, thanks a lot for your emails.
This episode of Unirunner Video Drum Lessons has been sponsored by Dave on behalf of Mr. Jim Feck and drumart.com, a great place to turn your bass drum into something very special using your images or artwork. Rockstar quality at garage band prices. Jim can do it for you, and fast. Dave says, "I'm very happy with the job he did for me." This episode of Unirunner Video Drum Lessons is also sponsored on behalf of all the praise band drummers who struggle to keep their inner bonhams under control.
And that concludes this week's Unirunner Video Drum Lessons. Now, if you've got tips on soloing, please visit unirunner.com. You can add a comment to this podcast. I'm sure there are many of you that have tons of ideas other than what I've just mentioned here, and can elaborate and help me fill in the gaps on that too. So thanks a lot for watching. Until next week, keep practicing, take care, and God bless.